Clark. Okay. All right. We ready? I'd like to call this meeting to order today, Tuesday, September 2nd. Adam, will you please call the roll?
Mr. D.
Here.
Ms. Casper.
Here.
Ms. Casper. Ms. French.
Here.
Mr. Horton. Ms. Schaefer.
Here. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Adam, please call the roll.
Mr. D.
Yes.
Ms. French.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Here.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Say yes.
Jude, please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with facilities.
Tom, would you like to start us out, or would you just like me to dig in?
I'll let you begin
Okay,
because I
dig in.
don't have a whole lot.
Okay, good, that's okay. Master Facilities, just wanted to give you a couple of updates. We have been on, I call it the Building Our Future Tour, right? It's our Eras Tour of giving informational sessions. We're in the process of doing one for each building staff. And then we will also circle back with administrators. I think it's on September 8th or 9th, maybe. And give them kind of a levy overview, like Gary gave with us as well, just about do's and don'ts and policies and things. In addition to the building staff, we're also doing PTOs and PTAs, each group. Actually, this Wednesday, we have our first DPC session that Adam and I will be at during the day. And then lastly, attendance wise, we're getting around 30 or so folks per meeting, give or take. Our largest was by far the Democratic Party, looking to schedule one with the Republican Party as well. And then also the band boosters was probably our second largest, maybe with about 60 or so. So Adam and I and Betsy, we were kind of doing some brainstorming about how to extend that reach, because as you know, 62% of our voters are empty nesters. So we're talking about or toying with the idea last week of doing maybe like a Zoom or a Facebook one where you can be in your home and still watch it. Kind of talking through what the question and answer sessions kind of could look like in that and the level of engagement. But I think we're just trying to extend the reach of people that we can get to. Not that 20 or 30 is not great, but when you extrapolate just the size of our district, making sure that we can reach as many as possible. So we're still working with Betsy on how to get that planned and just the best format for that. Again, whether that's Facebook and recordings or Zoom with kind of waiting rooms and things. So that'll be scheduled in the next couple of weeks as well. We did have our first homeowners association last week. Again, probably about 30 in attendance. Also in connection with one of the guests there looking to perhaps have a realtor meeting as well. That's a pretty large group. I didn't realize that's about 3,000 people. I had no idea it was that large. So again, looking to schedule that as well. So all of those calendars, not only do I include them in my update, but also on the website, there's a link there of all the open spots and all the groups that are currently scheduled that Betsy keeps coordinating with. In addition to that, any questions about that, building our future pieces? I would say right now we're in the I think our goal was maybe 2 a week. We're well past that. We're probably in like the 4 or 5 a week, on a slim week. So in its full zenith, probably end of, September, October, we're
I
probably
think we
looking
had
at,
12
that 1 week, it was.
the week before last.
Yeah.
We probably had 8 last week.
I will say when you hit 5, we probably reached saturation in a day. We did 5 one day, and I feel like I was teaching honors English 10, and I couldn't remember what period I'd been in to say what. By the time we got to the end of the night, I was like, what have we said and who have we not said it to? We did in our homeowners association the other day, just because it was outside and technology and things. That was our first one without the regular slide deck. So Betsy had printed out kind of large foam core things, and that worked well. But that was our first kind of different format that we had tried. So again, I'd say by the end of September, October, we're going to begin pretty steady drip, probably in the 15s or 20s per week, but we'll see what that continues to look like. On top of that, as you know, our very first out the gate experience was the Westchester trustee meeting. Yeah, that was the first one. We are looking to schedule one with Liberty Township. We feel like that we need to make sure that we do the counterpart of that. So we'll probably do that not next week, but after the 14th, looking to schedule that. Now that we have the sites determined and things of that nature, we feel that it's time to go share. There was some discussion at some point of returning to Westchester, or to the Westchester folks. But we're still talking through that. I don't know if anybody had any direct thoughts about that or preferences about that.
Question.
Mhm.
What was can you share a little bit of what your encounter is with them?
Yeah, at the, in Westchester, it was the very first one. It was the day after we had, levy trading with Gary Stradonsky. And Adam, you can certainly agree or disagree with me here. I would say it was, pretty well. They have some concerns. I won't say for the whole, but I think the biggest questions we got were, the amount of buildings in Westchester versus Liberty Township, which is one of the reasons, if you remember when we were looking at the 4 new elementary schools, it's one of the reasons that we chose the Creekside West Freshman Central Campus instead of Heritage, because it is on the Westchester side of the line. I think in conjunction with that, it was time on the bus, particularly because there's not a junior school in Westchester. There is some concern. I heard it last week at the homeowners association as well. There is some concern about how much time children will be on the bus, going from like Adina or Shawnee or that area of Hopewell over to the junior school. And then, the cost. I think a couple of the trustees were just concerned about the cost to our taxpayers, particularly the empty nesters. And then one did express concern, but we later followed up that it is not a collective sentiment of the group, but that the buildings look fine from the outside. But there was, again, a follow-up conversation that said that maybe that was not the collective of the group and perhaps they were not the best informed when they made that statement. So we will be scheduling the Liberty Township. It will be after September 14th. I'll keep you posted of that date. And then Westchester, there at least is a discussion of perhaps going back. Now that we have the site, because at that time we did not have the 4 sites determined, those kind of things. So a little bit farther along in the process. So that is up for.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest takeaway is that they had some questions that we didn't quite yet have answers to. We had conceptual, here's locations, but we didn't have those answers yet. And then, sometimes when you have difficulties with a question like that, then it can snowball a little bit. And I think that's what we experienced. So, now that we have more of the direction, I think that it makes these conversations go a lot smoother.
Well, and I would hope, I was there. I would hope that if we go back, there's one thing to have questions, but I thought there was a fair amount of disrespect.
I think
It was the way that the questions were asked. It was the yelling at us. I would hope if we go back that there's a little more respect and it's more of a dialogue than a.
And I think that dialogue piece is important, and I can only speak again for me, but, we went on a Tuesday. It was the Monday after the levy training. So Mr. Stradonsky was certainly in my head about you inform and you inform and you inform and you do not persuade. And so I think part of that was maybe a hesitant on my part to sound like we were trying to persuade or sound like we were trying to get you to agree with us. But I think, after a series of practice, I think we're much more prepared for that dialogue. So I think that would probably be a good thing to at least try to engage in as more of a dialogue rather than kind of one-sided.
And it wasn't until probably the end part of last week when we started doing a presentation about the facts on these and didn't get as many new questions.
Mhm.
As we go through these also help with getting questions that we didn't think of maybe. And so then that's kind of helped evolve the presentation as well to reduce some of those questions.
Yeah, so the reason why I ask is because I've had similar questions. And where the major concern has been is, remember when we were doing our fact findings and invitations to get to engage, prior to even when we started the entire plan, what I was hearing is that I did not get any invitation. I didn't talk to anybody. I knew that was gonna come because it's like there's a resistance because you didn't engage me at the early stage. Why are you coming now to give me information that I should have received long time ago? So I thought I raised that one time, if you remember.
Any other feedback from trustee pieces?
And I think we owe them an update, given that we've made decisions and answers to their questions. And continuous engagement with key stakeholders, I think is important, especially given some of the potential plans we have at partnering with Westchester Township. So I would encourage us to make sure that we get back to them regularly.
And Adam and I, between us, even though we haven't met with them as a group, we have met with several trustees individually. Just trying to answer their individual questions, kind of in one-on-one conversations. And I would say, depending on the trustee, they're similar flavors than what you would expect. But I do think those are a back and forth and an opportunity to address their individual questions rather than kind of an open forum piece. Kind of in that vein, communication feedback, continued refinement. Betsy's team is working very diligently, as Adam mentioned. Every time we do a presentation, there's copious notes on the questions that we got, trying to put those back into the FAQ or to integrate those into the presentation. And I think the presentation continues to evolve based on those questions. The other day we were at Adina. That's probably the most questions we've gotten at a given time. And there were even a couple of new ones in there that we tried to capture. But I think our biggest refinement is twofold. One, kind of just a weekly, I'm going to call it a video or a snapshot to just make it really meaningful and manageable chunk to get to the masses, but then also continuing to look at print publications that would go to every household, not just parent, but every household in Lakota to make sure that they are getting that information. Yes, it will be in the quality profile. Yes, it's in the financial prospectus. But I think we're looking at a couple of different flyers, mailers, whatever you may be, that to try to make it stand out in the mail when you get it. So Betsy's continuing to explore that. And then every time we do a publication, whether it's a video, print, whatever it may be, we do get legal eyes on that to make sure that there's not a persuasive line versus a fact. The other day we changed one word in a sentence because legal thought, maybe just that could be construed as persuasive. So we do get that feedback as well. Is there any community feedback that you have received about communications, meaning there's not enough of them, or the messages? Have you gotten any feedback about the communication that people are hearing in general, just because we're continuing to refine that?
I had a couple of people stop me at the football games on Saturday or whatever day they were, Friday.
Right.
And they liked a lot of staff has said that when you and Adam came to I think it was East, that really helped them understand. And it's that one flyer that breaks it down to that I carry with me now.
The half and half.
Yeah, the half and half flyer. They said that was really helpful, not only for them to understand, which I thought this was interesting, they said it helps them being able to field questions from their neighbors and explain it. So
I think that is an important part. We've got that question at Adina the other day that said, can you, again, just a fact sheet of here's what elementary parents need to know. Here's what secondary parents need to know. Here's what an empty nester needs to know. I forget which building that we came out of, but someone just said what's the top 5 or the top 10 for an empty nester, and trying to cater that communication. So I think that's a valid point. It is a complex issue, and how do you make that simple enough for anybody to be able to understand and read?
I've seen I think all the bite-sized communications that have gone out, on the social media, and then kind of chunking it out on our website has been really helpful, because again, we knew when we did this, we were doing what we felt like made the most sense, but we knew it was going to be complicated to explain. And I think that the communications team has done a very nice job of taking it in bite-sized chunks so people don't get overwhelmed. And I think that that's been very helpful. And I also think I feel like there's this whole angst about building new versus remodeling old, and I feel like we're trying to continue to hit the fact that just as, you know, P&G abandoned a building and built new, it makes financial sense. Even though logically, some people don't think that makes sense. There's reasons local corporations, you know, the township did that with their square. They started over, you know, we're doing the same, we're following the same blueprint that many other organizations are. So I think that's been good to continue to try to say there's a reason, and we are ultimately trying to give the local taxpayers a good return on investment, and that's why we made the decisions that we've made thus far.
I think people are continually excited at when these schools will come online. And I think that's something that we bury the lead on. Typically, when we talk about it, we're talking about all the finances. But the fact that, you know, kindergartners and first graders are going to see those elementary schools opened up before they leave those buildings is really resonating with the people I talk to. And the second thing is, I think there's a lot of conversation going around the fact that Nancy Nix, our county auditor, is reflecting the ballot language in her calculator versus, you know, what we will actually be collecting. And so I just want us to think through what our response is on that, showing why she chose to do that and why we're choosing to do that. I don't want it to turn into that Spider-Man meme where we're pointing at each other, you know, saying you're right, you're right. But I think, you know, just being able to succinctly summarize why she chose to do the calculator that way and why, you know, the actuals will be different will be helpful as people work through that.
Something that we found with some communication back and forth was, and I can't fault her for it, to not do actual ballot language, she would have to do even more due diligence than we've done to be able to show different angle.
Yep.
And when you look at all the governments and all the constituents that she supports and all the ballot issues that were on that she would have to do that for, it would really create some real problems with making sure that they're also correct. So the ballot language, the way it's presented, they can guarantee that it's not incorrect. And we've had to do a lot of, and here's the more piece to it, because, you know, you think about it, a lot of people have a lot of different angles when they run these. We just seem to have a little more than normal with this one, which makes it even more complicated. Yeah. So we did reach out, we did talk, she did give us that feedback, said that she reviewed with her team, and to make sure that nobody would be wrong. I understand where she's coming from.
I
It just
agree.
makes it hard for,
I
it just makes us have to communicate better.
Yeah, I love what you just said. I think building that into the presentation to reflect that, so it doesn't seem like well, she's saying this, we're saying this, blah, 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 like
We have done.
yeah, as we should show that respect, I think.
Yeah, and we're not, and we've had several conversations with what may be a different perspective on this topic. And the good feedback that we've had is everything does seem to be very factual. I mean, even from the negative side, and that's something that I've made very clear is we all live here. We're all part of the community. People are very passionate about the way they believe in whatever these topics may be. So being respectful, sticking with the facts, that way, you know, nobody feels unwelcome in the community is going to be very important.
I've gotten a lot of great feedback from parents. I think that they're definitely in support. I think there's some confusion around that. I think there's some confusion around people who are newer to the community. When you say it's been 13 years, they're like, whoa, you know. I think the empty nester piece is going to be huge. And I think you have to spend a lot of time really thinking through that. They have no idea. There's a lot of questions out there, and I don't know that Zoom is going to be the answer for those folks. I think they want to be in person. I think they want to be in front of you. I think they want to ask their questions presently. So I think thinking through that, and maybe the HOAs reach that a little bit.
We had, and then maybe I'm wrong, Adam, we had the senior citizens group this week, but I think it's getting rescheduled. I noticed it on my calendar.
At the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, so I think Betsy's in the process of rescheduling that. I don't know if, I think that was more on there and then our end, so I think we're trying to, or I don't know for sure, but I just noticed on my calendar. So we do have an in-person session there that we would like to replicate, like I said, as many times as we can. Because I agree with you, in person.
And maybe that goes out in a mailer of some sort so that they're aware of it. I don't know how, you know, that communication is getting out to them. Social media is not going to be the way. for some, I don't know if we spend some money on a mailer to tell them when the meeting is, or have multiple meetings, maybe one in Westchester, one in Liberty Township. But I think that piece is gonna be really huge. Those are gonna be the people who have no idea, have all the questions that everyone has brought up tonight or today. So I think we need to think more about that piece.
I agree. And I know that's on Betsy's mind as well. Betsy's team, goodness gracious, she had a very, very creative kind of fall idea that would have touched a lot of folks, and legal advice was just, it was, it was legit, but it just, there was some concern a little bit, so we're trying to reinvent that and rethink it, because it would have had a far reach, but there were some concerns just about, the legalities of the levy process. So we're gonna look at that again. So that legal piece is certainly helpful in just making sure that every I is dotted and T is crossed.
Was it a legal opinion that it was more of a persuasion than a factual?
That it could have been viewed as persuasion because of how it was basically passing from neighbor to neighbor, and individuals were involved, and you're not supposed to rally support in the individual distribution and things of that nature. And so there was just like, this feels beyond the school district handling the message. It feels like you're reaching into the community and they're sharing it as well, like on a larger scale. And so they asked us to kind of revisit that.
So is that something we could hand over to the levy committee, who is allowed to do that?
There was some discussion about that, yes, there was some discussion about that. Anything else? I've taken some notes so I can make sure to meet with Betsy and team. Notes specific to communication or building our future. I'd say the building our future presentation normally is what, 30 minutes? 35 minutes
Typically, by the time from start to finish, it seems like we're about an hour.
with questions and
After the
things.
Q&A,
Yeah, Q&A.
the slideshow is about
Yeah.
25, 30.
Yeah, and we can even get it down shorter than that if need be, but it's probably around 25
Yeah.
minutes.
Can you, when we start advertising, we're advertising them in blocks of 45 minutes, and the ones that I've been to have never gone 45 minutes, they go long.
Okay.
So maybe say an hour.
Okay.
Or 45 minutes if you want to say 45, and then you in your head plan an hour so that you're not in between something or late. But I noticed that they're going a little longer with questions depending on where we are.
They always have.
And that is a fair point, because I think there's a couple coming up that the interim of time between them is shorter.
Yeah.
We don't want those to be too tight. Okay. Anything else? Okay, Tom? Steen?
Oh, I'll throw
No.
one more thing out before we do. We did hear that through the social medias that this was the biggest bond in Ohio school history. Here's the thing with that it went in one of my meetings, I did say, that is true. From all the information we've seen, that is true. Currently, the highest one ever approved was $480 million with Cincinnati Public, and it was back in 2003. So 506 is larger. And that was where there was a good conversation of it's fact, that's fine, it's fact, and 2003 is also a fact, so.
How much would that be today, the
But-
480?
Well, and we did have some back and forth about that here of, oh lordy, how. But there's so many different ways you could calculate that, you'll never be able to prove it, so we'll stay away from that.
Right.
We're just gonna stick with what the facts are.
Right.
Which is 03. Because one might say if you had to do it today, it might be 3 times that amount. Or they might say they wouldn't have done it that way. There's too many things to get down in the weeds on the debate back and forth to just stick with 480 is a fact, 2003 is a fact.
Well, Adam, if I could add to that, I think what you also need to look at is the total package. Because Cincinnati was 1.117 billion because of the state contribution. So yours, you have to add close to 200 million. You're at, over that $700 million project.
That's good information as well.
Columbus chunked it in 5 different segments. So you put all those segments, even without adjusting for inflation, which they started in 2002. You have what will be about 1.4 billion. Cleveland, again, because the state contribution.
You might scoot up that way, we can make sure that we're,
Sure, I actually like being in the back row.
I get it.
Yeah. Or the tabletop.
I was one of those kids, so we are putting together with the state, because believe it or not, they don't have a file where they give us all this, so we're collaborating with them in order to get the full story. Toledo was 767 million. Again, several years ago. Akron started in 2003, 800 million. Dayton was 520, but they started in 02. And I think they wrapped up either 12 or 14. So if you look at large school districts similar in size and adjust and do all those adjustments, you're right on target. Now, what's really interesting is none of those school districts were able to deliver and promise what you are in terms of efficiency, in terms of bringing neighborhood schools back, in terms of, no increase till for 3 years. I mean, you have an incredible story. And the one thing you don't want to do is play whack-a-mole. Jens will tell you, people are going to make comments. They're not always going to tell you the full story, the whole story, the most accurate story. So we could spend a lot of time chasing these down, and this one, I think it's worthwhile chasing it and giving you the information that's appropriate. So that you can see that you're right on target for the size of district. You're very comparable, but you also have a much better story than anyone has ever had. So the other districts also have usually had a higher contribution from the state. So therefore their local share has been a lower percentage. But still, in terms of total building projects, very comparable.
Something last week I took a deep dive into was just to get a better understanding of what the OFCC's opinion is on renovate versus rebuild. To just get a really better, because we do get a lot of questions about that. Most people would say, well, it's always going to be cheaper to renovate than it is going to be to rebuild. That's a very common thing. Where the numbers really come from, and this is where it is a communication and conceptual issue, is they're looking at it on 30-year timeline. And in that 30-year timeline, that's where they're looking at what's going to be the cost of ownership. You'll see that as well playing into this. And that doesn't factor in any of the programming enhancements or operational efficiencies. That's just cost of building ownership. And so they'll look at a new build to be a 40-year timeline and the renovation to be a 30-year timeline. So when you look at it over a longer period, then you go, oh, okay, I can see where that makes some sense.
Thank you for all the work you are doing to inform our community and being very careful and making sure we're legally compliant. And we appreciate how much effort is being put into communicating what is a complex but important issue.
Yeah, we had a very good one 2 weeks ago. That was when it was supposed to be a 30-minute, 1 hour and a half. And at the end of it, it was a very agree to disagree type conversation, but it was a very respectful, very good conversation. And at the end it was, and you did a great job just giving facts, even though it did feel a little passionate at times, but it was still fact-based. It was still, it's like what we're talking about on these projects, when there's so many of this that we're seeing very clearly now of it's how you advertise it. And so when you advertise the biggest bond in Ohio history, that's true if it would be approved. However, when you look at cost of project and maybe this approach versus those approaches, overall should be able to produce a better, more efficient, more fiscally responsible project overall. So it has been an interesting last couple of weeks, that's for sure.
And I feel like we talked about chunking it out and if that would be more palatable, but we felt like that was somewhat disingenuous, I feel like. It's
And
kind of the conclusion we drew. We can pretend we can do all this for a chunk, but we can't.
That question came and that question's in the presentation as well, while we didn't take it in sections. And I will say, kind of to Adam's point, at least in two presentations that I can think of where there was, definitely some dialogue around the subject. At the end of the meeting, a couple folks said, well, not gonna say I agree with you, but I'm gonna say that there's a plan. And the fact that there's a plan makes me feel better than when I walked through the door. And so I think that is a testament to, they can't say it's not thought out, doesn't mean you agree with it, but it is thought out, you have a plan, you have a vision. So like I said, two of the more kind of longer meetings with a lot of dialogue that came out of it, so I think that is a benefit. So I took copious notes as I always do. I will continue to work with Betsy's team. I know Tom is pulling that data for that recent, Tom's team is pulling that data for that recent piece. So I think we will continue to evolve. But to Adam's point, we do recommend people ask any question or email any question because it continues to refine the FAQ. The FAQ is robust, right? I mean, the presentation is robust too, but the FAQ is definitely in the weeds details. Like you can look at how much square footage is going to be added to each building. I mean, it gets really, really detailed depending on the level or the idea that you want to kind of follow. So we continue to update that, but those questions do make us better each and every time.
And maybe, as the five of us can, if we know of a group that we can reach out to, like Isaac, if you know somebody, Christina knows a group, especially if it's an empty nester group, that we can reach out to have them get on the schedule to do the building our future tour. That
And
way.
with me being out, if somebody did have something that this is the only time that would work, I will have my devices, I'll have Zoom, I'll have all of the fun stuff. So I'm still more than happy because I don't want us to get to the finish line here and go, wish we could have, would have, should have. You know, this has been
That's right.
I already feel like I'm a little time committed over the last 2 weeks with, we don't want to have to continue these campaign trails. There's a lot goes
Well,
into this.
You're, just to clarify, you're gonna be out because you're on vacation.
Oh, yeah.
You also need to.
You're more than happy. You're happy as mine.
Yeah.
In Adam's absence, we will continue those. You know, I think we make a good team.
We've had some
And God
good
love you,
stuff.
he can probably recite what I say and I can recite what he does. You know, as long as I don't have to talk about amortization schedules, no, I'm just joking. We'll be fine. So we're gonna continue that schedule, and he'll be fresh and ready when he returns.
And pan,
That's right.
fresh, ready and pan.
Yeah,
Tom, anything else from your team today? Okay. Just transitioning from master facilities. Okay. Next subject is attendance. I wanted to give you an update on attendance in our last board meeting on the 12th, I think it was August 12th. The attendance numbers, when we gave them, I was like, I don't know, they felt a little nebulous. So I went back with enrollment to work on some things, and I want to give you some updated enrollment numbers. They just didn't sound quite right in my head. So with that said, and these are for a series of 3 days, I just want to give you some comparisons, okay? On 8/12, currently in this school year, we had 17,141 students. In 2024, for comparison, we had 17,508. Okay, on August 18th, we had this year 17,175. Same time in 2024, we had 17,547. And then August 26th, this current school year, 17,167. 2024, we had 17,512. I guess that those numbers just seemed weird when I just wanted to double check those over a series of times. So I wanted to give you the most updated numbers. I'll give you them again in the September meeting. As you know, we still go through enrollments all the way through September. Yes, I know school starts on like August 11th, but families are still getting things wrapped up. One of the things going kind of back to master facilities, we are asked about enrollment sometimes, and we talk about the 2 enrollment studies that we've done, both the one that's required of OFCC and the individual one that we did. And how I would phrase it, or how I do phrase it, is we're on a normal growth pattern, right? So a normal growth pattern, you see a little, it kind of goes up and down, but we are on that normal trajectory, 10 and 15 years out. This is not the crazy bubble growth that we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s, but I always just want to give you those, and I'll continue to give you those throughout the year at the beginning of each board meeting. But again, I wanted to correct because they just seemed odd, and just have enrollment pull those again over a couple dates to check.
Something else to keep in mind when looking at enrollment numbers is we always try to go with static dates, because static dates typically will be somewhat similar. But always keep in mind for here, 1% would be 170 students. So we could still have a bit of a timing issue of when in our procedural process withdrawals happen. Right now, we always think of enrolls, but there is the give and take on both sides of that. So always take that into consideration as well. If we could have a bit of variance, just basic timing.
Is there still people in the queue?
So there are people in the queue, meaning we are waiting on their documentation. So that is a good point. Nobody is waiting on us.
Right.
We are waiting on them to finish out their process of, maybe that's custody documents, maybe that's leases or affidavits. So we are waiting on their documentation, but as soon as they give us that documentation, we are finalizing that within the day so that students can start ASAP.
Do you know how many people that is?
I do not off the top of my head. The last time
Last
we
week it was
checked,
around 150.
that's what I was gonna say. It was less than 200.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically, you think Labor Day is kind of
Threshold.
it's kind of a nice, we made it past point.
And oftentimes what we're waiting on are affidavits. So affidavits are people who are in a year-to-year lease or kind of a different living arrangement. And what that requires is it requires a notarized something from the leaser. And sometimes that person can be hard to track down, right? Maybe they don't live within that complex, or maybe they sometimes don't live within the community. Sometimes that has to be mailed, and again, it has to be notarized. So that's normally the hiccup.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's I think.
Yes, for the interest of those that do not understand the enrollment process. If you look at the numbers, between August 18th to August 28th.
August
So
28th.
by this time last year and this year, you can see that there's a decrease instead of going increase. So what created that decrease? Because
So
consider it.
to Adam's point, enrollment, you could look at enrollment every day and it's going to be different, right? Between enrollees, withdrawals, all of those things. And so really, instead of the day-to-day numbers game, I think it's really the long haul, right? So looking at those at the end of each year, and then looking at, and again, longitudinal data as well, right? So when you look at things like open enrollments or taking open enrollment away, all of those things have an impact on enrollment. So just to look at it as a snapshot is very, very difficult, which is why when you do enrollment studies, they tend to look at them 10 and 15 years and look at that amalgamation of that data. And so I think, and we certainly have that. I sent that to Tom's team as well. We have those enrollment histories from the last 10 to 15 years past. And then we have the projected enrollment and the enrollment studies for the next 10 to 15. So I think it's really to look at it in the individual. You could play the numbers game every day, but I think that longitudinal data again shows that normal growth pattern rather than and when I say normal growth pattern, you also see that within bubbles of kids. So for example, I'm gonna pick on my own child. My own child is in a bubble, right? She's in a high bubble, like her grade band is just higher compared to another. And so you also see bubbles working through a community. Right now, our bubble is 3 through 6, which is why we're out of space desperately. And eventually you'll see that bubble move into the high school. And then and again, it kind of comes in like a 5 to 7 year cycle where you see these larger bubbles of kids go through. And so those also impact enrollment in a grade band or in a building as well.
Well, and I think it's also, you mentioned open enrollment, but we have been intentional. We had some folks grandfathered in open enrollment, but as that grandfathering timeframe moves along, we're having kids intentionally that will no longer be here because we wanted to protect the space that we do have for those who were resident students and not open enrollment
The
students.
current grandfathered is the 8th graders through the seniors, just for, And I just remember that because
If-
it's easy to remember that with my own, yeah.
And we also just graduated a bubble too. That
Right.
was the highest number in the US, the highest number of college applicants ever.
Well, we've had a big fear coming through, and this is not just Lakota, this has been like a state all treasure thing. Because the state funding formula is getting more onto live data, live enrollments. And we've all known that we have a bubble coming through that's a small bubble, not a big bubble, of the COVID decrease. One of the things that we were very pleased with when we did our enrollment study here was for us to not feel like we're going to have a big decrease with that, because, you know, our community is sustaining. That's like 5 years ago, the equivalent of increasing. Because there's so many schools, and when you look at how like casino revenue, for example, is factored, the per pupil amount will go up because overall the students went down. This year alone, the state as a whole is down 14,700 students. And just the casino, because I just got through doing this, the casino calculations. So if we even maintain through those enrollment studies, if we even maintain through that, that's going to have a positive impact on us as if we had grown.
Also, just to make sure that, cause you might hear in the community, I know at least a couple of you did. In grades 3 through 6, our class count is up there, in some places. And what I mean by that is we are consistently sitting at that threshold of 27, 28. But there are some advanced classes, particularly in grades 3 through 6, that are in the 30, 31, 35, 34. I sent an email last week to a principal, and we need to really, really look at that. I think there's a misnomer of like, well, they're honors kids, it's okay. It's not. As somebody who's taught honors children and AP children, you know, that's not a number we want to see. And so we're going to continue to evaluate that as we go into scheduling and sectioning next year. I'm not sure we can fix it because literally we're out of space to add classrooms. But making sure that we get all eyes on that in the master scheduling process to see if we can problem solve or at least hand schedule or balance better or do something. You know, I was asked the question at the homeowners association the other day. Someone said, do buildings raise test scores? No, by themselves, they do not. But the education that can happen in a classroom when you have more space, when you have more technology, when you have more safety features, that does. And from somebody who, going back to 2013, 2011, you know, I was teaching honors English 10 with maybe, I don't know, 26, 27 children in a classroom. And suddenly that number became 33 and 34. The amount of papers that you can literally assign and grade and give feedback to is different. The amount of conferencing touch points that you can provide children is different. And that's what changes instruction. So nobody is out there saying that buildings are suddenly going to make student achievement go out the roof, but there is certainly a complement of what kind of instruction a building can help provide in that. So it's not it is education changes and the building can complement that. And so I do think as we look at those elementaries that are out of room, and 3rd through 6th grade, you know, that's some real critical time for numeracy and literacy. And so to see numbers sitting that high, we just need to really continue to evaluate that. Again, not saying we're going to be able to solve that because of the space issue, but again, I want to make sure all eyes look at it from top to bottom to make sure that we can problem solve that to the best of our ability.
I think that something that's interesting too, is you look at enrollment numbers, where they are.
Mhm.
Like you said, the bubbles where the 3 to 6 is just.
3 to 6 right now, the high school has a little bit of a dip. 3 to 6 is large. Eventually that will work its way up. And also, you know, I'm going to pick on just different sides of town. Do you know what I mean? If you look at Cherokee, I mean, Cherokee is, you know, sitting right at 800 versus if you look at another elementary school that might be in the, you know, lower 700s, or it's like Hopo Junior. You look at that, it's in the upper, you know, 580, something like that. You look at Liberty Junior, you're sitting at above 700. So you also have pockets. And I know Tom's team has explored that as well, just from the difference of east side to west side. And there's multiple reasons of that, alternative school of choice forms, all kinds of things. But I do think it's that continual balance of trying to balance the numbers, be as equitable as possible, and then understand where those pockets of growth are happening, whether that be grade band, neighborhood, building, whatever it may be. Okay. Originally, we had on our agenda, and we updated the agenda, so we don't have to amend anything like that, but we are going to move the goal discussion, to September, 22nd, in our regular board meeting. I know we've had my discussion, Adam will have his discussion at that time, so I just wanted to let you know that. The other, agenda item today is board meeting settings. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, you know, we have our working meetings here, we have our regular board meetings, at East Freshman. And I'm certainly aware of the reasons why we had those historically, but the question I want to ask to make sure we're all on the same page is we need to do a little, upkeep. Speaking of upkeep, we need to do a little upkeep, of the stage area. I think things could look a little bit more professional in that setting, from the stage itself to just the lighting. We've all talked about different aspects. We can make it more inviting to our community. But before we kind of go and invest the time and the lift in that, I wanted to make sure, just double, triple check, are we good with keeping that location? Is there any interest in exploring a different location for board meetings, understanding our history of how we got there? The only one that I maybe would think of, and I'm not saying that it's the only, would be the Innovation Hub in the East Freshman building. It does have it does have two exits for safety reasons. It's a little bit more intimate, that's my word. It's smaller, not as cavernous. The lighting is different. The sound, we'd have to explore, because I know there were some investments made for the sound and the videoing and things in the auditorium. But before we went through that, I wanted to check, are we fine with our current location, or is there any interest in talking about that further?
I would be open to the hub. I don't like the interactions or lack of interactions that we have on the stage. And then also, given everything that we're doing in the master facilities, I don't think, I mean, the stage needs work just in general for
That's
the
accurate, yeah.
school, so
Accurate.
we might need to just move because of that. But I think, you know, when it was in Plains, and I understand the reasons to move away from Plains, I think you got better engagement from the community. It was more personable. I know when I sit on the stage, I can't even tell who's in the audience or not. And I think it is a little less intimidating especially for some of our younger kids as they come and present their student spotlights. It's a little bit easier in an innovation hub versus getting on a big stage with blinding lights. So I'd be open to looking at other locations.
My concern becomes that we spent money to get that facility ready to be for Todd's department and lighting and things like that, and we would have to do the same thing for the hub. And is that fiscally responsible?
And I can look into that. Like I said, I wasn't even sure there was an interest, so we can see what the lift would be technology wise. And I don't know what that is. I haven't explored that with Todd's team yet, to see if that even makes sense. But before we, you know, I kind of dipped my toe into that. I just wanted to see if there was any interest, because I do know, I was not here at the time, but I certainly know that there were reasons for being in that space. And so I just wanted to check before we even explore even further, so I can look into that, the lighting and the technology pieces.
And I agree with Doug that you look out there, you don't know who's out there, but I also know that sometimes the innovation hubs, if they can be very, very crowded, and I worry about
The
them.
innovation, oh, go ahead.
Is that the room we use for interview?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll hold, I'm gonna say comfortably, you could fit more in there. I would say it'd hold about 60 comfortably with lines of chairs. Also on the stage, knowing that we were gonna have this conversation, there are about 4 lights currently that are not working on the stage. So that could be some of the lighting issues that we experience, so we can look into that. Like I said, we're gonna fix something, right? We're either gonna fix our current spot or kind of look at a new, but I do think the lighting at least can be improved a little bit on the stage piece. Gonna explore with Mr. Brinkman the stage itself, because I do have it's not as simple as just paint. So we're gonna have to look at a couple pieces of that. But I can also explore with the tech team what the investment would be in each freshman hub, to even see if that's reasonable, manageable, minimal, what that might look like.
Or if what we already have and invested in is transferable to that location.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me personally, it's whatever is most efficient, and again, still meeting the safety standards that our SROs are comfortable with when they're there at the meetings is I'm fine with either location, whatever.
I do think, when you talk about efficiency, the hub is used a lot. Right, so there is, and I just think of our custodians and maintenance, there's a tear down aspect of that, that's a
Yeah.
little bit different than on the
But-
stage. And
Yeah.
put up, that's a little bit different, so, there's the efficiency of just us, and then there's the efficiency of what it looks like on a day to day, and that's what I'd wanna talk to Bill. Mr. Brinkman about as well, cause I think there are a couple angles, but like I said, I just wanted to broach the subject before we got any further, if you were like, nope, just, we're good. But we can do a little bit more digging in that as well.
Having chairs already in place is pretty helpful
Yeah.
for the setup
Yeah.
crews.
100%.
But I understand also that there's a class that happens on that stage, so they're also tearing down a
Yeah.
classroom, so
Yeah.
like, again, it's kind of a give and take with having, I can't, as a staff member, tearing down the classroom.
They've done an excellent job. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize they had a
Yeah.
class on the stage, so yeah, they've done a great job of
Yeah,
making that
Yeah.
disappear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll look at a
Nine.
couple of different angles, back some data, around that. Like I said, I just wanted to, before we kind of went any further, I'll pause, get a pulse, and then we can go from there. All right, that's all I had this morning.
Wow.
all right, maybe we could have that on the agenda stuff. Any other conversations, any other issues? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So-
Isaac, I couldn't tell who was second.
Oh.
Well,
I'll take it.
Christie. All right, any discussion? Hearing none, Adam, please call the roll.
Mr. D,
Yes.
Ms. French,
Yes.
Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes,
At 7:50.
realize we could have done.
I know, I thought it was gonna go longer too.